So I'd just like to welcome everybody to tonight's webinar. My name is Liam from PCPSI, and very grateful again, Steve, to have you join us tonight.
Thank you.
These are a series of webinars that will prepare us for, number one, you coming in July, the 5th and the 6th of July in Belfast, and the name of the workshop is Trauma, Regulation and Building Resiliency, Recovery After Developmental Trauma. And then everybody is very excited, Steve, about you coming next year to do the first Transforming the Experience-Based Brain training in Ireland. And you're coming for 15 days, 3 different modules, and the dates are the 6th to the 10th of February, the 11th to the 15th of June, and the 24th to the 28th of September.
Right.
So we're really looking forward to that, Steve. And what tonight is about is just giving people an appreciation of what they can expect, number one, at that workshop, anybody that attends, and then giving people an appreciation of what they're likely to learn, what they're likely to get if they complete the training in 2020. So just to tell you, we got excellent feedback from the last webinar. And I've got, people have been very curious about certain aspects of your work. So I've compiled a series of questions, taking the feedback that people gave me and some of my own ideas. So we might start there. And I think where we'll start, Steve, is the title we've given the webinar is Nurturing Resiliency, the use of Transforming Touch. And just to give people an appreciation, what does this mean? And, what does this look like in therapy?
Well, the whole idea of nurturing resilience is coming back in to establish either new platforms or to work with reestablished platforms that are already in place, building up their resiliency, building up their capacity, understanding that without resiliency, there's not much energy to get much done in your life. And so figuring out how to bring resiliency back in or to build new platforms, because some folks with developmental trauma would have never had any resiliency. They're already running on borrowed time, so to speak. And transforming the experience-based brain, we use transforming touch. And transforming touch is a way of working with nonverbal trauma, looking at the trauma that happened either during utero or after birth, but where there's not usually going to be any sort of cognitive memory. We also include inherited trauma, and we look at inherited trauma as the parents of the child, as well as the grandparents and the great-grandparents, and any issues that they may not have resolved in their own trauma history could be passed on down generationally. So we're looking at using touch, which is a very specific protocol. It's not like doing massage therapy or any sort of body work. It's about setting boundaries with the client to be able to touch into their systems, into the nervous system. We use the adrenals, the kidney area, we use the brainstem area, and we use the lower legs as the primary spots, and then we move forward and we have some other enhancements that we add on when we're doing that kind of work. And in the Transforming the Brain, we include primitive reflexes. And we've also gone a step further, and we also include the vestibular reflexes, which there's 3 vestibular reflexes that normally are not worked with at all by most folks, but we've included those because we find some people have trouble with eye movements, with their vision, or with their throat, with the vagus nerve. or with their being able to turn their heads. And so we've added those in. And we really, coming into it, we really want to keep looking at it from the standpoint of creating safety in our offices where folks can begin to somehow mine is popping up. I just realized I'm having viewers coming into my screen. Do you have that too, Liam?
I have one particular lady that I can see. Oh, they're gone off now again. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that it wasn't not recording or for everyone, or everyone wasn't able to see what was going on. But it's really about creating safety with the therapist becoming the secure base, moving towards developmental trauma through the eyes and the lens of attachment, and through the eyes and lens of transforming touch.
Great. So that brings us on nicely, Steve. So, like, for those that are interested in doing the training in 2020, you've just mentioned some of the skills that they'll acquire. So they'll develop competency in their capacity to assess when developmental reflexes are still on or not integrated. They develop competency in working with the vestibular system. So if I do the training and I'm interested in developing competency in working with developmental trauma, what else will I get that I haven't got already from doing the training, Steve?
Well, one of the things you could get is, if I understand that question correctly, but what you're going to get is, one, you're going to get how to work with developmental trauma, the language of developmental trauma, working with the different ways that we work with parts, working with structural dissociation, working with moving through that, working with the primitive reflexes, the vestibular reflexes. And then in module 3, we go specifically into eating disorder treatment, working with children, working with grief and anxiety, working with depression. We get more specific in the 3rd module, but we really, our goal is to build a platform where someone who's never done touch work ever can come into this training to learn from the very beginning. When we work with layers, we work with the skin, we work with the muscle and the bone, and we work with these layers, and we start to find balance and regulation right off the bat in the very first day. And we really want folks who come, we want the student to be able to finish the series, the 3-module series, and to completely have a good idea of how to incorporate the work into their own practices and to move forward with working with developmental trauma. Even in the very first module, they'll be taking home skills they probably don't already have, or if they do, they're going to be more enhanced skills and be able to take it home to their practices and begin working.
Great. And 2 specific questions we got, Steve.
Okay.
Can participants apply the skills straight away after module 1?
Yes. They will go home with a clear protocol. They will understand the protocol. They will, in module 1, they'll start off with 3 of the primitive reflexes, and they'll touch on the language, but not a lot into the language in module 1. But we begin with the basics of working with kidney adrenals, brainstem, and they will definitely leave with skills that they can take home and immediately apply to their practice. And that's what we want to happen. We want them to go home and start practicing. So when we see them in module 2, we always start off the module by saying, what's been going on? How's you've been using it? What questions can I answer? And so we reintegrate what they've been working on back into module 2. And if there's something that they're lacking or something we're missing, we bring those back in too. We want to make sure that that they're getting a full education where they're not just out there and you know, not getting what they need in order to put it to practice.
Great, Steve. And I think the other question, I think it's a kind of concern people have. What happens between modules? And I think the concern is around, is there still kind of a platform where people can get support from each other, where they can kind of enhance their learning, where they can develop their skills?
Yes, and because we've never been to Ireland as far as doing a full training there, we will probably do Ireland a little bit different than anywhere here in the States. Where we've been so far, we encourage groups for, like if there's 4 or 5 therapists in a certain area, that they work together and practice with each other and trade off back and forth. That's one way that we support the training. And then if they have questions, they can email them in. For all of my students, they can always email me at any time and ask me about one of the protocols or how they're doing the work or what they need to add on to the work. And so we're always open to that type of answering questions. The other thing that we will probably do, and we don't have it on our books yet, but we'll probably figure out some sort of consult group where either myself or Kathleen Love, who is my primary assistant, who will be in Ireland with me, one of the 2 of us will be doing consultation, where we will come online on Zoom and help folks out too, because we really want to support all the students in Ireland. You know, Ireland is, just from being there one time, I can tell you it already has a huge place for me. And I so appreciate the work that's going on in Ireland from the folks I met in Cork this past fall. So we will do everything possible to support them. However they need supported, we will figure that out.
That sounds great, Steve. Really good. Okay, so I'm just going to change tact a little bit now.
Okay.
And just to say, anybody that has questions, please send the questions in, because we're going to give about 15 minutes at the end specifically for questions.
Right.
Okay. So I've been reading the famous book.
The famous book, yes. If we showed it, we could show it in dual right now.
And there's a few quotes that have jumped out at me. So I'm going to read 1 or 2 of them and ask you specific questions around the quote. Okay, Steve?
That'll work.
Okay. So the clinician's own ability to self-regulate and co-regulate will be the most important piece of therapy in working with developmental trauma. So the question is twofold. For those on the call that are not familiar with these terms, self-regulation and co-regulation, could you explain them, please? And you might say why our own self-regulation and our own co-regulation is so fundamental to the work.
Okay. Let's go backwards. The reason that we need to be able to regulate as therapists, we have to have some level of regulation when we walk in to be able to self-regulate ourselves and to have some sense about co-regulation, is that if we don't have that, we would be setting the stage for a reenactment to occur, because someone with developmental trauma has already experienced a lack of attunement. They've probably either by a parent who was unavailable to make the attunement with them, or because of medical reasons, they could not be available. There was no way that they could be in the same situation with a parent. So that's why we do it. when we look at developmental trauma, we go from the basis of self-regulation and co-regulation. What isn't in the book that we do in Transforming the Experience-Based Brain is the hierarchy of healing. In the hierarchy of healing, which is a triangle, we go from the I don't know into the illogical. Out of the illogical, we move into the concrete. Out of the concrete, we go into the even though, and out of the even though, we move into self-awareness or an awareness of self. The reason I bring up that hierarchy of healing is that most people, when they show up working on developmental trauma, and they don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know. You ask them questions, I don't know. I don't know. And the reason they don't know is that it's usually somatic. And it's in their body memory, but it's not in their cognitive memory. In the I don't know, when you were born, you should go into regulation within the first few days. Definitely in the first few weeks after birth. You should be able to self-regulate, and you should start experiencing co-regulation through your primary caregiver. If the primary caregiver comes in, meets your needs, and the important part, has a attunement and relationship with you, then you have a good chance of developing self-regulation and co-regulation and auto-regulation. All the regulations are pretty well going to develop in a non-traumatic way. If you come in with developmental trauma, what we understand is that Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, looking at the polyvagal theory, the infant is going to be in a state, and it could happen in utero, where they're not getting their needs met. And they can't fight and they can't flight, but neither one of those are their options, so they freeze. If the infant repeatedly freezes, then they're going to go into what's known as high-tone dorsal state. A high-tone dorsal state looks just like a normal dorsal state. Normal, not really normal is the word I want to use, but a non-traumatic state. So if we have a non-traumatic state here and we have a high-tone dorsal state here, as the infant grows and develops, many of the same things are going to be on both sides. And oftentimes they can grow up, they can get through school, they go to college, they can get married. All of these things are happening, but the difference is the cost of doing business. Over here, the cost of doing business is much higher because their regulation system is a dysfunctional regulation system based on their early experience. They're really not getting a full sense of self-regulation. They're not getting a sense of co-regulation. So now I jump back to that hierarchy of healing. I don't know is a dysfunctional regulation system. Moving on up out of I don't know, it's illogical. They begin to make up reasons that don't make sense, like the wind blew out of the east on the third day of the fourth month in the fifth year of the seventh generation. You know, doesn't make sense in the illogical. And then they get in that yes, but. Everything is yes, but, you know, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I have this, this, this. All three of those in the hierarchy of healing are normally related to more of a dysfunctional regulation system. It also lends itself into an external locus of control. So the person, when they're coming to see you in the beginning, you know, blames. There's always someone outside of me that's causing me to behave in this way. So looking at that until they move into the even though, when they go into even though, it's like, oh, even though this is happening, I can stay regulated, I can breathe. That's self-regulation. Even though is the very first sign that someone's moved into a fully qualified self-regulation state. And that is cognitive, meaning that it's top down. We have to be able to use our cognitive brain to recognize and go, even though this is happening, I can behave different than normal. It's not an automatic response. In the dysfunctional part, it's automatic responses. You know, we're automatically responding constantly. But up here, we're now going, okay, now I know and I can manage it. Then we move on up to what's known as co-regulation. In co-regulation, I am able to find other people without conscious thought in a room or a space who are regulated and regulate with them. I can begin to regulate with, which should have happened way back in the nursery. But if that didn't, then that's what we're building towards. So we use regulation and understand regulation as the primary way. Once we can bring someone into self-regulation, all the way through there's healing occurring. But as we really bring in the self-regulation, they begin to move out of that high tone dorsal. But within that high tone dorsal, there's another term that I came up with that's in this book called faux window of tolerance, F-A-U-X.
Yeah.
Faux window of tolerance is the window of tolerance within the high tone dorsal state. So remember when I said the high tone dorsal state looks very much like the non-traumatic state? Well, within that high tone dorsal is a window of tolerance. That's a faux window of tolerance. It's not a real window of tolerance. It'll act like a real window of tolerance, but as someone moves on up into self-regulation and co-regulation, this begins to fade, and then they move into and they transfer over into a non-traumatic window of tolerance and a non-traumatic. And so this shift from high tone dorsal over here to this non-traumatic state is a huge, scary state of change. That transition has to really delicately be worked with the client, where the client knows this is normal. Everything you're going to experience is normal as we're moving over into this other. We reduce the effects of adverse childhood experience. We reduce the allostatic load. We reduce the likelihood that they're going to die early. We reduce that likelihood that they can't have a healthy relationship or a relationship. But we do it from realizing whichever state, either the non-traumatic state or the high tone state, is normal. When the client shows up in my office, if they're using a high allostatic load, it does not matter to me. They're normal. The reason they're normal is they walked in my office. All of their support system, all of those parts, so to speak, if we just move them over here to parts, they may have 12 million parts, but all of those survival parts are keeping them in a static position. They're in this within the high tone dorsal. And so the goal is understanding that, oh, they're already normal. They've already figured out how to exist. They're already living. They may be complaining. They may say, you know, I want a relationship and I can't have one, or I want something different and I can't have it. They may be doing all those things, but the reality is they're existing and they're alive and they're normal. And so we just want to help them with the idea of, we're going to move from this normal over to this normal. But the way we move from this normal to this normal, the non-traumatic normal, or the non-traumatic state, is by reducing your allostatic load. The quickest way to reduce your allostatic load is through regulation. Once we reduce your allostatic load, we can begin to expect some change and some movement to occur. And so it's looking at regulation from a much greater perspective than usually the way it's looked at, because there's so many components that all need to happen at the same time in order for them to transfer over, which knocks out that theory that we go in and out of high tone dorsal. I don't believe we do. I think that high tone dorsal state with a faux window is where a lot of folks live their whole lives.
Yeah.
And they don't just pop in and out. People will go into freeze, but until they exhaust out the freeze, they go in and out of freeze, over and over and over. Then they create the high tone dorsal.
Definitely.
So it's looking
you're,
different.
you're really kind of after going into a lot there, Steve. And I just want to acknowledge some of the points that you've made that we're going to go in, hopefully if we get time tonight, or on the next webinar, which I think is the 10th of June.
Yes.
I think a really important idea is the idea of capacity.
Yes.
The client's capacity, because a client that has been in this high tone dorsal state all their life, we can think they have capacity. They might think they have capacity themselves, but if we use specific interventions and they haven't capacity, all we will end up doing is reinforcing their management strategies.
That's correct. I believe that, and that's, Liam, I have seen a lot of folks in my years of work, a lot of folks. And I see a lot of people that go through a lot of therapy where in their mind, they get better. But it doesn't hold.
Exactly.
It doesn't last. And without getting into that regulation system somatically, I don't know how people are getting them to last. The results are much greater when you can work in that system, where you can really bring about change.
Exactly. And I think two of the ideas that we'll go into as well more in detail is the 4 window. I think really important.
Extremely.
And then really important is how to work with dorsal physiology. Really kind of important again.
Yes.
I just want to bring you back because you mentioned something at the start that's really important.
Okay.
And you mentioned the hierarchy of healing.
Yes.
And I think what you're saying in a way, Steve, is that this is a really good map to be able to assess a client's capacity for self-regulation and co-regulation. So you can actually track where they are on the map. So you're a client of mine. I ask you a question. Why is this happening, Steve? I don't know. So it's really a very good tool for telling you where a client is on that map. And what I was thinking about as you were saying it, when clients come in and you are assessing their capacity for self-regulation and for co-regulation, what else do you use, Steve, to assess that?
Well, one is I use history. I want to know what's going on in their history. I want to find out what they know about from the moment of conception and before. I want to get all the history I can. I really like history, which gives me more understanding of where they've been and what they've been through. The other parts that I work with is I work with what's happening right now in their life. I want to know what they see as wrong. Why are you coming to see me? What do you identify as wrong? Are you coming because a partner or a parent is sending you in? Or are you coming because you're coming on your own? If you're coming because someone sent you to see me, why are they sending? And do you agree with what the problem is that they see that you need to work on? And trying to figure out those parts. The other thing that helps a lot is just touching their skin. Just touching that skin and going into the fascia, going into the muscle and into the bone. That really quick, going through those layers just to see if there's balance in there. If there's any sense of like or different. A lot of the evaluation is like or different. Is this like or is it different? Is it like or is it different? And getting people to understand that if you can identify what's like and what's different, we can move these systems, we can move these layers, we can move somatically, we can bring about change.
Wow. And I'm imagining one of the things that you're assessing as well is behaviors that make no sense in a person's life.
Yes, of course. And we, oftentimes with developmental trauma, that is high risk behaviors.
Mm.
We're not just looking at basic behaviors, we're looking at all their behaviors, what they're doing, whether they're having, doing something athletically. Maybe they're jumping out of a helicopter onto the top of a mountain and they don't have regulation. But that sense of jumping in out of the helicopter gives them a rush, or they're using some sort of addiction. But high-risk behaviors, we definitely go through that, whether they're sexually acting out, whether they're, however they're managing, what management strategies they're using, how they're using those defensive accommodations to get through the day.
Great. And I know tonight we have a few addiction counselors on the call.
Right.
And I know they've asked one or two specific questions. Like, would you say, number one, that, when you're working with addiction, you're working with developmental trauma, they're so intimately related?
I have never met a person who lives with any sort of addictions, from hoarding to alcoholism, to drug dependency, sexual addiction. I have never met that person who does not have developmental trauma.
Yeah.
They're 100% at this point in my career. 100% match up.
Okay, brilliant. And that makes just total sense. How could it be any other way?
Well, it does make sense when we consider, if you're living over here in a non-trauma situation and there's no trauma and life's kind of doing what it's supposed to do, you wouldn't need those behaviors to feel normal.
Okay.
Over here in that developmental trauma, they use those behaviors to try to bring about some sense of regulation, some sense of normalcy with what's happening around them, where they fit in.
Okay. And just two last points on that, Steve. What type of boundaries do you put around addiction? Like, let's say alcohol. If a person is drinking, do you have specific boundaries around that? They have to be off drink for a year or 2 years, or?
No. Interesting question. Of course. I don't focus on the addiction. I focus on the core issue. I might have them going to an addiction counselor in conjunction with me, or I might have them in a 12-step program, or they might be choosing some other things. But I'm down here working in the core because I have to restore regulation. I have to build new platforms. I have to work on this level. So the addictive behavior, I'm not focused on that as much as I am coming underneath it and changing this to where this isn't necessary anymore. So I'm looking at it from bottom up, looking at the core self first. So if someone comes to see me, I'm not immediately going to put them on some sort of regimen. I might suggest, AA might be a good place to go, NA might be a good place to go. Let's refer you to an addiction specialist. Let's look at some of these things. But again, my experience is that folks do not get over addiction without regulation long term. What they tend to do is they change their recovery for a new addiction. So I'm addicted to alcohol. I now have a recovery program that I like, so this now becomes my new addiction. And that's good and that works, but I really want to come in and get that primary core self to where it goes, okay, I can stop drinking, maybe I'll go to this program or go to this counselor, but I can quit because I have more capacity. I don't need this addiction to make me feel safe. I don't need this addiction for me to have a relationship. And I don't want this addiction, so they can begin to change their behavior. And they have more space and more capacity to do that.
Makes total sense. Total sense. And I know one of the people on the call tonight, they work specifically with eating disorders.
Right.
And just a very general question again, Steve. Initially, when you start doing the table work, is there potential for an addiction to kind of take off a bit initially?
Unfortunately, yes. That is always possible. Like I said, Kathleen Love is coming with me. She will be part of the team while we're in Ireland. And eating disorders is her specialty. She teaches all over the country about eating disorders. So she'll be with me, and she completely uses transforming touch in all of her work. And what we both have found and we prepare for is that when someone has addictions, we talk about it up front with the clients that says, you might feel the urge to increase for a while. That's perfectly normal. And we're going to work with that. And then we're going to begin, and you'll notice that the change will begin to happen. But we always, my experience with any addiction and any recovery program is that relapse has to be talked about. You have to prepare clients, especially when we're looking at developmental trauma. We really want to prepare clients for their possibility that they could relapse, and that it's okay, and we're not going to throw them away if they do, that we're still going to work with them.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going in the same direction. And the difference is that the relapse is normally much less impact on their life than it was before.
Yeah.
And so we really prepare them up front for that.
Yeah. It's a real compassionate approach.
Yes.
It really is.
It is. It's as close to love as love can be, and a whole lot of love is thrown in there too, because you really develop when you're working with someone and you've become their secure base. One of the gifts of being a secure base is to show empathy and compassion. And I have to be able to understand that no matter what you tell me, it's okay. And I can hold space as a clinician. I can hold space for your story. No matter what your story is, I can hold space for it.
Okay. Great. Okay. I was reading the book again over the weekend. You hear what I said again?
I heard that. I haven't finished it yet completely, but I do remember writing it. So, the parts I wrote, I pretty well got. So, yes, go ahead.
So one of the things that came to me strong this time is that the book is really advocating for a new map.
Yes.
And I'm just going to read a quote now again. So it says, we need a new map, a regulation-informed approach to working with those living with the symptoms of or the defensive accommodations related to developmental trauma. Why is this so important, Steve?
Well, it's so important because that's bringing in the hierarchy of healing, understanding that as a map. The reason is that if every time something happens, I do this, and this isn't helping me, but I do it because it's the pattern that I've always done. I stay in this map, and this map says this is how I'm going to do it, then I'm always going to respond the same way. So by coming in and creating a new map, if I say, Liam, I want you to go to the airport, and I want you to fly to Austin, Texas, you're going to look, and you're going to have a very determined route to get here. A lot of people, when I say go figure out, they're going to get lost along the way. They might go, from Ireland, they might fly to India, and then they might fly to Japan, and they might fly back to Germany before they ever get here, because that's their pattern. So we want to create a much more efficient and new map, where the map doesn't take such a high allostatic load, really looking at the allostatic load and how much stress they're experiencing. I mean, we really want to change that. We want to come back around and say, wait a minute, you don't need to be, putting so much all the time into feeling safe. Let's create a new safety map. Let's create a new life map. Not where everything, clients I see with developmental trauma oftentimes show up, and in that illogical, they're saying, well, because of reasons that don't matter, this is why I'm on this map, and this is why I do things the way I do, and being able to come back in and gently changing their mind by changing their capacity, where they can change their mind on their own without us having to push or to try to change it, that they're anxious to change their map. They want a new map. I've never worked with someone that didn't, if they were committed to the treatment, that was not committed to a new map.
Okay. What else became very clear to me, Steve, is that this, the regulation-informed approach, it needs to be administered in small increments.
Yes.
Why is this vital, and what would this look like when you're working with somebody?
Oh, that's a really good question too, Liam. The reason that we do it in smaller increments is we believe and we hold the possibility of radical remission. We do believe that someone could, in one session, get better and their life change and they move to a new normal, and all of that is totally possible. My experience is that 99.999% of the people I see, we really have to come in and solidify new platforms. They never had a platform. Their platform from the very beginning was disruptive and incomplete. So it's not like shock trauma, where with shock trauma, they can come back around and they go, okay, before the shock, I was over here in this non-traumatic life, and then I had the shock and I was over here, and I can come back to here and everything will be okay. With developmental trauma, we're rebuilding their whole life experience from their whole life. So if we came in and we did that really rapidly, we could cause a psychotic reaction or something much more extreme. Or we would just repeat the experiences of the adverse childhood experience study. Folks that did it fast dropped out of the program and went back to where they were before in their lives. And we're going to kind of be doing that by slowing it down. Let me come in, let me move a little bit of information. Let's get a little bit every week. Let's build this resiliency, build the resiliency, build the resiliency. Let's build this up slowly. Then it has a much better chance of titration into this system, where it becomes more concrete within the system. Otherwise, we're just going to build loose on top of loose on top of loose on top of loose, and that doesn't work.
Yeah. So we're really, the transforming the experience-based brain. It's really moving away from the old cathartic approaches.
Totally moves away from the cathartic approaches. There's, we can all cry. And I can cry until the end of the last day on earth, and that's not going to change my early developmental platform. It just makes me, that cry, I see those cries, instead of being cathartic, they're much more over here in what Janina Fisher points out as the attachment cry, that attached cry coming through. And they're really wanting me. It isn't cathartic, that they're going to move and wake up and see the flowers, it's telling me that they want me to rescue and save them. They want someone to come in and say, everything's going to be all right. Let me show you and let me take care of you. That approach doesn't work. I cannot take care of you and expect you to develop any sort of footing of your own. So I want to support your ability to build these new platforms where you can get to where you're headed, where you don't need to be rescued anymore. The rescuer becomes yourself. And you're the one rescuing this cry. When I can work with that attachment cry, that attached cry, and I can say, yeah, I really hear that. You know, let that part of you know that I'm right here. I'm right here with you. Yeah.
Okay.
And really slowing it down and bringing in more language and more empathy really makes a huge difference.
Okay. Great, Steve. I'm just conscious. We have about 15 minutes left. Now, we have one question so far. Do you have any, can you see any questions from your side, Steve?
Somebody's saying they can see us. Let me see. Oh, there it is.
It's just
I know who this is from. This is great. Is it imperative to first finish all SE training before learning your method? Is it okay to learn the intermediate level at the same time? This is a great question because there's a lot of students from the somatic experiencing programs, as well as Hakomi and sensory motor, and a lot of different programs that they're involved in that tend to lean toward somatic work. It is not imperative that you finish the SE training before you come and begin this training. Intermediate level is great. It'll give you some more information. Unfortunately, in the SE, somatic experiencing program, unless it's changed and I'm not aware of it, they don't do a whole lot of touch until they get to module 3. They begin some touch in module in advanced, one or advanced 2, I'm sorry. In one of those advanced, it's not module. And so looking at it, we really want to, you know, say, come on. You know, if you have the time and the ability to learn, come on and join us. There's no beginners in our training. Everyone's beginning. So we, you know, as long as you have a desire to work with developmental trauma, and this is a direction you want to work in, come on over. Somatic experiencing training is a fantastic training. It wasn't originally developed for developmental trauma. And so we're looking at it from the angle of developmental trauma, and the two of them make a nice cohort together to have both trainings. But it's definitely not required that they finish all the training before they join us.
Great. Great. Okay, I don't think we have any more questions.
Okay.
Probably a good time to start finishing up, Steve.
Okay.
Really, again, thanks very much for joining us tonight, and thanks to everybody that was on the call. And just to say, the last of this webinar series is on the 10th of June at 8 o'clock again. And for anybody that's, you know, maybe on the fence about doing the training in 2020, I think it would be a real good idea to come to the 2-day seminar in Belfast on the 5th and 6th of July, because I think that 2 days will give people, you know, more of an appreciation again of your work, of what the regulation-informed approach looks like, and we'll go into it more in detail. And again, just to say that the training in 2020, it's 15 days, so I feel, you know, I feel very lucky to be taking the training this year in Chicago, and I can say from personal experience that it's a really comprehensive training. Like
Very intense.
you really cover a lot of ground. I did the somatic resiliency and regulation in 2018, and I find this more comprehensive. And I find that this is giving me more of an appreciation of the work than last year, or maybe it's just that I'm developing as I go along.
Could be either.
Yeah. And so just, you know, the 3 modules, first module, 6th to 10th of February, second module, the 11th to the 15th of June, and the third module, the 24th to the 28th of September. The training is up on our site, www.pcpsi.ie, so people can go in and just, you know, book the training. It's separated into 3 modules, so that will help people, you know, that they won't have to pay all the money up front. And if anybody has any specific questions, they can send me an email. My email address is Liam, Liam, @pcpsi.ie. And Steve, I look forward to seeing you on the 10th of June again. Have a good few weeks until then.
All right. I will look forward to seeing you. And again, Liam, I can't tell you how grateful I am for you and grateful for the opportunity to come to Ireland. So thank you. And I will see you on the 10th.
Listen, thank you, Steve. And good night to everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.